So after reading this story about the Queen of Heaven, and now knowing a little bit about the Uruk expansion and how the peoples and their culture and their pagan religious beliefs spread throughout Mesopotamia and Babylon, we can now understand why God would tell his people that when they came into this land, they were not to worship their gods, and not only that, they were not even allowed to copy their customs and their rituals. Let's get the New Living Translation Bible. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 4. Do not worship the Lord your God in the way these pagan peoples worship their God. Let's get the King James Version now, and let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1. When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations, underline that, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. These 7 nations were all part of that Mesopotamia Babylonian region. Now listen closely, verse 2. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them. That means kill them, and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughters thou shalt not give unto his sons, nor his daughters shalt thou take unto thy sons. And why is God being so harsh? For they will turn away thy sons from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Verse 5. But thus shall you deal with them. Now listen closely. You shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. Not only are we not to worship other gods, he doesn't want us to keep their altars, their shrines, their symbols, their customs, anything. We are not to have anything to do with their paganism. And of course, we know through Scripture that God's people continue to disobey him, and this is serious. And we're going to see how their disobedience had everlasting ramifications, even up until today. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. And because our God is God, the one and only God, and because we are his people, holy and separated, a special people unto him, he gave us specific instructions on how to worship him. And we're going to see it has nothing to do with the way the world worships him. It isn't Ash Wednesday, it's not Holy Tuesday, it's not Easter or even Christmas. Let's go to the book of the Judges, chapter 2, verse 11. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam. Now that's Baal, remember, Tammuz or Damuzi. Verse 12. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, of the gods of the people that were around about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And again, that's Tammuz and the Queen of Heaven, Inanna or Asherah. Now that didn't take long. In the Exodus, we saw Moses leading the people out of Egypt, and then Joshua leading them into the Promised Land. And as soon as Joshua died, bam, this happened. And God's people practiced some form of this paganism right through the time of the Judges throughout the history of Israel and Judah. Let's skip to chapter 10, verse 6. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, and the gods of Zidon, and the gods of Moab, and the gods of the children of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord, and served him not. So they served all the gods of Babylon and Mesopotamia, all the different names of Tammuz and Inanna, the Queen of Heaven. And again, this went on throughout the history of Israel and Judah, and you can read of this throughout the books of the Judges, the Kings, and the Chronicles. Let's turn to 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 4. For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrificed unto their gods. So King Solomon did exactly what God told us not to do, marrying foreign women who turned his heart from serving the Lord. And he even raised his sons in the same abomination. Let's skip to 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 21. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonite. And Judah, this is the southern tribe of Israel, did evil in the sight of the Lord. And they, that's the whole tribe, just about everyone, not just the king, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sin which they had committed above all that their fathers had done. For they also built them high places and images and groves on every high hill under every green tree. The word grove in the King James Bible is an Asherah pole, or Ashurah. And remember, Ashurah, or Ashtaroth, was the Babylonian goddess of love and sexuality. So grove, or Asherah pole, is like a statue or a teraphim of this goddess. It's an object of worship. Verse 24. And there were also Sodomites, that's male temple prostitutes, in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. So now let's do something a little different. We always use the King James Version of the Bible when we do our studies. But now let's get out the Message Bible and let's reread these verses to get a real understanding of God's pain and anger. And then we'll continue with this version of the Bible for the rest of this section. 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 21. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, was king in Judah. He was 41 years old when he took the throne and was king for 17 years in Jerusalem, the city God selected from all the tribes of Israel for the worship of his name. Rehoboam's mother was Naamah, an Ammonite. Judah was openly wicked before God, making him very angry. They set new records in sin, surpassing anything their ancestors had done. They built Asherah, sex, and religious shrines. See, the King James is too nice. These shrines are places where the people worship their pagan gods Tammuz and Asherah, or Inanna, the queen of heaven, by having sexual orgies. Let's jump real quick to Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 7. And this is God speaking. Why should I even bother with you any longer? Your children wandered off, leaving me, taken up with gods that aren't even gods. I satisfied their deepest needs, and they went off with the sacred whores and left me for orgies and sex shrines. Now let's return to verse 23. They built Asherah sex and religion shrines and set up sacred stones. Now these are Asherah poles, remember, groves in the King James, all over the place, on hills, under trees, wherever you looked. And worse, they had male sacred prostitutes, again, temple prostitutes, polluting the country outrageously, all the stuff that God had gotten rid of when he brought Israel into the land. And let's go to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6. In the 9th year of Hoshay's reign, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. Now this is speaking about the 10 northern tribes of Israel, and took the people into exile in Assyria. He relocated them in Halah and Gozan along the harbor river and in the towns of the Medes. The exile came about because of sin. The children of Israel, again the northern tribes, sinned against God, their God who had delivered them from Egypt and the brutal oppression of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They took up with other gods, fell in with the ways of life of the pagan nations that God had chased off, and went along with whatever their kings did. They did all kinds of things on the sly, things offensive to their God, then openly and shamelessly built local sex and religion shrines at every available site, and again for their sexual orgies. But wait, it gets even worse. They set up their sex and religion symbols at practically every crossroad, and again, groves in the King James or Asherah poles. Everywhere you looked, there was smoke from their pagan offerings to the deities, the identical offerings that had gotten the pagan nations off into exile. They had accumulated a long list of evil actions, and God was fed up. Fed up with their persistent worship of gods carved out of dead wood or shaped out of clay, even though God had plainly said, "Don't do this ever." And even today we have these figurines in our churches, in our yards, on the dashboards of our cars, and even hanging on the walls of our homes. Verse 13. God had taken a stand against Israel and Judah, that's both the northern and southern tribes of Israel, speaking clearly through countless holy prophets and seers time and time again. Turn away from your evil ways of life. Do what I tell you and have been telling you in the revelations I gave your ancestors and us today, and of which I kept reminding you ever since through my servants, the prophets. But wait, it gets even worse. But they wouldn't listen. If anything, they were even more bullheaded than their stubborn ancestors, if that's possible. They were contemptuous of his instructions, the solemn and holy covenant he had made with their ancestors, and of his repeated reminders and warnings. They lived a nothing life and became nothings, just like the pagan people all around them. They were well warned. God said don't, but they did it anyways. They threw out everything God, their God, had told them and replaced him with two statue gods shaped like bull calves, and then a phallic pole for the whore goddess Asherah. So let's be blunt here. A phallic pole is a male penis. Remember Semiramis and King Nimrod? These people carved and shaped an image of an erect penis that they would bow down to, that they would kiss, that they would worship. But wait, it gets even worse. They worshiped the cosmic forces, that's astrology, the zodiac, sky gods and goddesses, and frequented the sex and religion shrines of Baal. And again, these sex and religious shrines were places where they had sexual orgies to worship the gods of the land. Inanna, Isis, Asherah, Ishtar, whatever name they used, they were all the same pagan goddess. And this is our Easter. But wait, it gets even worse than this. Verse 17. They even sank so low as to offer their own sons and daughters as sacrificial burnt offerings. These bastard children conceived from these orgies, and the mothers and fathers, not knowing or even caring who the father was, offered them up as burnt offerings to their pagan gods and goddesses. They, the people of God, indulged in all the black arts of magic and sorcery. In short, they, and again, this is the people of God, all 12 tribes, prostituted themselves to every kind of evil available to them, and God had had enough. Now in time, King Hezekiah, the son of King Ahaz, destroyed these places of this pagan worship, but Manasseh, his son, had rebuilt them. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 1. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 55 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hephzibah. In God's judgment, he was a bad king, an evil king. He reintroduced all the moral rot and spiritual corruption that had been scoured from the country when God dispossessed the pagan nations in favor of the children of Israel. He rebuilt all the sex and religion shrines that his father Hezekiah had torn down, and he built altars and phallic images for the sex god Baal and the sex goddess Asherah, exactly what Ahaz, the king of Israel, had done. And again, this is Tammuz and the Queen of Heaven. He worshipped the cosmic powers, taking orders from the constellations. He even built these pagan altars in the temple of God, the very Jerusalem temple dedicated exclusively by God's decree. In Jerusalem I shall place my name. And he built shrines to the cosmic powers and placed them in both courtyards of the temple of God. He burned his own son in a sacrificial offering, and probably multiple sons and daughters. And if you remember from our study of hell, this was done in the valley of Ben Hinnom, or the valley of the sons of Hinnom, Gehenna in the Greek. Now listen up. He practiced black magic and fortune-telling. He held seances and consulted spirits from the underworld. These very same things are happening today. Much evil in God's judgment, a career of evil, and God was angry. As the last straw, he placed the carved images of the sex goddess Asherah, that's the Queen of Heaven, in the temple of God, a flagrant and provocative violation of God's well-known statement to both David and Solomon. In this temple and in this city, Jerusalem, my choice out of all the tribes of Israel, I place my name exclusively and forever. And do you realize that there are carved images of Mary in most Catholic churches today, and that the Catholics refer to her as the Queen of Heaven? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 4. Let's use the New Living Translation. Do not worship the Lord your God in the way these pagan people, these Babylonians, worship their God. So we just seen some examples on how God's people continually turned their back on him and went whoring after other gods, including the god Tammuz and the goddess Ashtaroth, or Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, despite his constant warnings. And remember, all these things happened for examples, and they were written for our admonition. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 7. I warned your ancestors when I delivered them from Egypt, and I've kept up the warnings. I haven't quit warning them for a moment. I warned them from morning to night. Obey me or else. So this adultery, this idolatry happened right from the beginning, right from the time of the 7-year famine when Joseph brought his father and his brothers into the land of Goshen. And there the Israelites started to worship the gods of Egypt. And this idolatry was so bad that God had caused their enslavement. Verse 8. But they didn't obey. They paid no attention to me. They did whatever they wanted to do, whenever they wanted to do it, until finally I stepped in and ordered the punishments set out in the covenant, which, despite all my warnings, they had ignored. Then God said, there's a conspiracy among the people of Judah and the citizens of Jerusalem. They've plotted to reenact the sins of their ancestors, the ones who disobeyed me and decided to go after other gods and worship them. Israel and Judah are in this together, mindlessly. That means without even giving it a second thought, mindlessly breaking the covenant I had made with their ancestors. Now, as God's people, they, as well as we today, are to act like his virgin bride. But we've seen throughout the Bible how God's people prostituted themselves like whores, going not just after the gods of Egypt, but also after the gods of Babylon and Assyria, which he told them not to do. And this broke God's heart and kindled his anger. Let's turn to the Psalms, chapter 78, verse 58. Their pagan orgies provoked God's anger. Their obscene idolatries broke his heart. Now let me pause here for a moment and point out that these aren't my words. These are God's words. I'm just reading them. So if all this is shocking to you, if you've never been taught this, maybe you should find a new church. Find one that teaches God's word as it is written, instead of a church that sugarcoats his word so as not to offend the congregation. These kinds of churches are men pleasers, not God pleasers. So with that being said, let's turn to Ezekiel 23, verse 1. God's message came to me, this is Ezekiel speaking, saying, Son of man, there are 2 women, daughters of the same mother, and this would be Sarah, Abraham's wife. They became whores in Egypt. So there's no doubt that while they were in Egypt, they began to worship the Egyptian gods, including Isis. Whores from a young age. Their breasts were fondled, their young bosoms were caressed. Now this isn't a gentle, loving caress, but rather an abusive, rough, sadistic manhandling. The King James says it like this. And they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. There were their breasts pressed, that squeezed, and there they bruised the teats of their virginity. They pinched their nipples. The Bible in basic English says it this way. There their breasts were crushed. Even the points of their young breasts were crushed. So this is a picture of a sick, sadomasochistic relationship, craving pleasure over love. God is using this physical illustration to convey a spiritual truth. He is equating filling a physical desire or need with filling a spiritual desire or need. The older sister was named OHOLAH. The younger was OHOLIBAH. They were my daughters, and they gave birth to sons and daughters. OHOLAH is Samaria. Now Samaria was the capital of the northern tribes of Israel, who would later give birth to the Christian nations, and OHOLIBAH is Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was the capital of the southern tribes of Judah, who would become known as the Jews, and also give birth to many sects of Judaism throughout the world. So this is referring to the tribes of Israel and Judah, and we just read of their adultery in the book of the Kings. But this is also speaking of us Christians today. Think of the United States and all the world's Christian nations in general. Verse 5, OHOLAH, remember Israel, started whoring while she was still mine. She lusted after Assyrians as lovers, military men, smartly uniformed in blue, ambassadors and governors, good-looking young men mounted on fine horses. And these represent all the religions of the whole region. Her lust, notice not love, but a sick lust, was unrestrained. She was a whore to the Assyrian elite, trying to fulfill some kind of spiritual void. Remember the symbolism. OHOLAH and OHOLIBAH were supposed to be God's virgin bride. She compounded her filth with the idols, or symbols and practices, of those to whom she gave herself in lust. She never slowed down. The whoring she began while young in Egypt, she continued, sleeping with men who played with her breast, that's abused her breast, and spent their lust on her. I don't think I have to explain what that means. See, these foreign lovers wanted to humiliate and debase her, and humiliate and debase her they did. So I left her to her Assyrian lovers, for whom she was so obsessed with lust. She was insatiable, never quite satisfied or fulfilled, this poor, pathetic soul. They ripped off her clothes, took away her children, and then the final indignity, the final humiliation, they killed her. Among women, her name became shame, history's judgment on her. And you can see why God's heart was broken, and why his broken heart turned to anger, and why he would give her a bill of divorce. Using the King James Version, let's jump to Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 8. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, now remember, this is God speaking, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. And now you can understand why God says he hates divorce. Let's go to Malachi chapter 2, verse 16. I hate divorce, says the God of Israel. God of the angel armies says, I hate the violent dismembering of the one flesh of marriage. So watch yourselves. Don't let your guard down. Don't cheat. See, God knows firsthand of the pain, the anger, and the brokenness that causes divorce. And how many of our churches today teach that God himself considers himself a divorcee? I would guess not many. Most churches look down on divorcees. Let's go to verse 11. Her sister, OHOLIBAH, now this is Judah, saw all this, but she became even worse than her sister in lust and whoring, if you can believe it. She also went crazy with lust for the Assyrians, ambassadors and governors, military men, smartly dressed men, and mounted on fine horses, the Assyrian elite, and again, bringing in those false doctrines of other religions into Judaism. And I saw that she also became incredibly filthy. Both women followed the same path. But OHOLIBAH surpassed her sister. When she saw the figures of the Babylonians carved in relief on the walls. Now this is referring to Ezekiel 8:10, and we'll go there. Ezekiel chapter 8, I entered and looked. I couldn't believe my eyes. Painted all over the walls were pictures of reptiles and animals and monsters. The whole pantheon. Pantheon means family. The whole family of Egyptian gods and goddesses being worshipped by Israel. And this would later include the whole family of the Babylonian gods. Let's go back to Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 14. But OHOLIBAH surpassed her sister. When she saw figures of the Babylonians carved in relief on the walls and painted red, fancy belts around their waist, elaborate turbans on their head, all of them looking important, famous Babylonians, she went wild with lust and sent invitations to them in Babylon. Now don't overlook this. She was the pursuer. Usually it's the men who seek out the whores. Here she is seeking them out. The Babylonians came on the run, fornicated with her, made her dirty inside and out, and when they had thoroughly debased her, She lost interest in them. They could no longer satisfy her lust. She still could not fill that void. Then she went public with her fornication. She exhibited her sex to the world, chasing all the religions of the world. I turned my back on her just as I had on her sister. But that didn't slow her down. She went at her whoring harder than ever. She remembered when she was young, just starting out as a whore in Egypt. That whetted her appetite for more virile, that means men with strong sexual drive, virile, vulgar, and violent lovers, stallions, obsessive in their lust. And this translation is being kind. Let's reread this from the King James Version. For she doted upon their paramours. This is better read as she doted upon their lovers, whose flesh, that's the male flesh, the penis, is as the flesh of asses, and whose issue, that's emissions or ejaculations, is like the issue of horses. Do these words of God offend you? Do these words make you feel uncomfortable? I hope so, because now you have an idea about how our Father feels. He is bearing his soul to us. Don't forget, he's talking about his own bride. She was never satisfied, always wanting more, always trying to fill some need that she would not allow our Father to fill. And again, can you see why this broke God's heart and why he became angry at Israel and Judah? Time and time again, God warned his children by the prophets about the spiritual adultery. And time again, they and we today continue in this sin. And sadly, even today in our own Christian communities, you will find all kinds of people buying all sorts of religious books and DVDs with the intent of living some kind of purpose-driven life, trying to fill some spiritual void that apparently isn't met with the Bible. But listen, everything we need is right here in his word, the law, the prophets, and the Psalms. All we have to do is read them and obey them. Okay, let's go back to Ezekiel chapter 23. Let's pick it up at verse 21. She longed for the sexual prowess of her youth back in Egypt, where her firm young breasts were caressed and fondled. And remember, not caressed, abused. So, looking at all this behavior and knowing how our Lord feels about it, what do you think he's going to do to Judah? Let's see. Verse 22. Therefore, OHOLIBAH, this message is from God, the Master. I will incite your old lovers against you, lovers you got tired of and left in disgust. I'll bring them against you from every direction. The Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, the Pecodes, the Shoas, and the Koas. Now, I looked these names up in the Strong Concordance, and they all refer to Babylon in one way or another. And all the Assyrians, good-looking young men, ambassadors and governors, elite officers and celebrities, all of them mounted on fine-spirited horses. They'll come down on you out of the north, armed to the teeth, bringing chariots and troops from all sides. I'll turn over the tasks of judgment to them. They'll punish you according to their rules. And of course, we know this happened when the Babylonians invaded and destroyed Judah. I'll stand totally and relentlessly against you as they rip into you furiously. They'll mutilate you, cutting off your ears and nose, killing at random. They'll enslave your children, and anybody left over will be burned. They'll rip off your clothes and steal your jewelry. I'll put a stop to your sluttish sex, the whoring life you began in Egypt. You won't look on whoring with fondness anymore. You won't think back on Egypt with stars in your eyes. A message from God the Master. I am at the point of abandoning you to those you hate, to those by whom you're repulsed. They'll treat you hatefully, leave you publicly naked, your whore's body exposed in the cruel glare of the sun. Your sluttish lusts will be exposed. Your lust has brought you to this condition because you whored with pagan nations and made yourself filthy with their no-God idols. You copied the life of your sister. Now I'll let you drink the cup she drank. Underline that. This is the cup of God's wrath, the cup of his indignation. Verse 32. This is the message of God, the Master. You'll drink your sister's cup, the cup of God's wrath, a cup canyon deep and ocean wide. You'll be shunned and taunted as you drink from that cup full to the brim. You'll be fallen down drunk, and the tears will flow as you drink from that cup, titanic with terror. It's the cup of your sister Samaria. You'll drink it dry, then smash it to bits and eat the pieces. like eating shards of glass, and end up tearing at your breasts. I've given the word, the decree of God the Master. Therefore, God the Master says, because you have forgotten all about me, pushing me into the background, you now must pay for what you've done. Pay for your sluttish sex and whoring life. Then God said to me, Son of man, will you confront OHOLAH and OHOLIBAH with what they have done? Make them face their outrageous obscenities ranging from adultery to murder. They committed adultery with their no-God idols. They sacrificed the children they bore me in order to feed their idols. And this is true for us today. We and our parents before us committed the same spiritual adultery. They passed it down to us today, and we in turn raise our own children in this same abomination. And there is also this: they defiled my holy sanctuary and desecrated my holy Sabbaths. The same day that they sacrificed their children to their idols, they walked into my sanctuary and defiled it. That's what they did in my house. Furthermore, they even sent out invitations by special messengers to men far away. So, not satisfied with the local pagan gods, the people of Judah wanted more. And sure enough, they came. They, the people of Judah, bathed themselves, put on makeup and provocative lingerie. They reclined on a sumptuous bed, aromatic with incense and oils, my incense and oil. The crowd gathered, jostling and pushing, a drunken rabble. They adorned the sisters with bracelets on their arms and tiaras on their heads. I said, she's burnt out on sex, but that didn't stop them. They kept banging on her doors day and night, as men do when they're after a whore. That's how they used OHOLAH and OHOLIBAH, the worn-out whores. Righteous men will pronounce judgment on them, giving out sentences for adultery and murder. That was their life work, adultery and murder. And God says, let a mob loose on them, terror, plunder. Let the mob stone them and hack them to pieces, kill all their children and burn down their houses. I'll put an end to the sluttish sex in this country so that all the women will be warned and not copy you. You'll pay the price for all your obsessive sex. You'll pay in full for your promiscuous affairs with idols, and you'll realize that I am God the Master. So again, all these things happen as an example for us to learn by. This and other stories in the Old Testament are like one of the parables that Jesus would use to teach his disciples and us a greater spiritual truth. And God is using this story of OHOLAH and OHOLIBAH to warn us, his bride, the descendants of Israel and Judah, the Christian and Jewish peoples of today, about this idolatry. Now, I think it's safe to say that most Christians today don't physically worship God by having sexual orgies, and we don't physically sacrifice our children to these gods. But spiritually, it's another story. Our adulteries and sexual orgies is flirting with other religions and mixing their customs and holy days into our worship of God. Our children are sacrificed to these gods by us raising them in these traditions, just as we were raised in them by our parents.